Okay, in order to do this problem, what you need to think back to is something from algebra. So the square root of x squared is the absolute value of x. And if you think about the absolute value of x, there's your two scenarios. It's x if x is greater or equal to 0, and it's the opposite if what's inside the absolute value is less than 0. The idea is if you have a number like the absolute value 3, because the number inside is positive, that's this first scenario, your answer is just going to be whatever that number is. But if you take the absolute value of negative 3, then it falls into this scenario. The number inside the absolute value is less than 0, so your answer is the opposite, which would give you positive 3. That's what this is saying. Or another way to think about it is the graph of absolute value of x is, this is the right side of the graph. When x is 0, you have x. And then the other equation, the left side, is negative x, right? These are your two pieces that make the absolute value graph. So when I look at a problem like this, you need to think about that the bottom, the square root of x minus 1 squared, is really the absolute value of x minus 1. So anytime you see an absolute value problem, you need to think about your two scenarios. So we need to think about your left and your right-hand limit. So if I plug in any number to the right of 1, what's inside that absolute value will always be positive. So we are going to take the positive scenario. So that absolute value piece really becomes the positive scenario, which is just x minus 1, and this is just really 1. But if I approach 1 from the left side of the graph, everything inside the absolute value is always negative, so you would take the opposite scenario. So the bottom simplifies to negative quantity x minus 1, and this becomes negative 1. So notice that your right and your left-hand limit are not the same, so we say this general limit does not exist. If you looked at this graph on the calculator, what it would look like is this. Right? So from the right-hand side, you're approaching positive 1. From the left-hand side, you're approaching negative 1. So that's why the general limit does not exist, even though the right and the left-hand limits do exist.